What is up, everybody? It's your boy Truechampionsteven here with a brand new Vanguard video for y'all. This time I'll be going over my top 5 tips and tricks for how to get better at the Cardfight Vanguard TCG. And this video is kind of really special because I'm kind of making it as a sequel to my very first video I ever made, my Learn How to Play Cardfight Vanguard video, which has slowly but steadily become my most popular video here on YouTube, and I think it's only going to get more and more popular as it goes on. So thank you so much for that. If you're coming from that video, because I did put a link to this video in that video, welcome, pleasure to have you. Hope you enjoyed that video, even though it was so poor quality. I mean, look at that. Oh my gosh, look how bad that looked. Oh man, but people liked it, so who cares? And they're still liking it, so it's awesome. So anywho, thank you so much for enjoying that video. I hope you learned some stuff, and I hope you guys are enjoying the game Cardfight Vanguard. If you are, let me know by leaving a like and a comment on this video about the favorite thing that you learned from that video and this video that I'm going to be going through very, very soon. Like I said, I'm making this video as sort of a kind of sequel to the Learn How to Play Cardfight Vanguard tutorial, where at the end of that video I kind of went over some tips and tricks on how to get better at the game, or just some really good techniques you can practice and practice and practice to get more, just to get better. But now I'm going to be going over some very strictly, like, these are competitive tricks that I use whenever I play the Cardfight Vanguard game, where any real competitive player is going to tell you that these things are really important to have a good quality of life when it comes to the card game too. So that's what I hope you guys take out of this video. If you do, please let me know by leaving a like on this video and subscribing if you're new, so that way you know when my videos go live for you. Now, with all that being said, guys, let's get into my top 5 tips and tricks for how to get better at the Cardfight Vanguard TCG. For tip number 1, it's kind of going to be like a continuation of a tip that I gave in the video itself. In the video, I said, guard when it's early, right? Guard when you can. Was kind of a good advice that I gave to people, because if you don't know, generally attacks at the beginning of the game are going to be a lot weaker than attacks towards the end of the game, because Vanguard kind of exponentiates up, you know, everything gets increasingly higher in power, increasingly higher in pressure. Like, for example, Force and Excel, the longer the game goes on, the more attacks and just the more power they'll physically have, which means it's harder to guard attacks towards the end of the game versus the beginning of the game. So guarding when it's early was kind of that big advice that I gave you, but now I'm going to be giving you a different advice. A little bit different. It's going to be guard when it's early and when you should. By that, you have to kind of know something, and that kind of brings to like a 1.5, like tip 1.5, is that damage is a resource, you guys. Damage is a complex, very useful resource in Cardfight Vanguard, but it's also kind of a detriment to you. So when you can control your damage to kind of the optimal setting of the amount of damage you need to be able to counterblast for your effects on your turn versus the amount of damage you need to not die if your opponent does a certain number of attacks to you, finding that perfect optimum like value or of damage is where guarding comes in. So if I have 3 face-up damage, and my opponent attacks me, I should probably stop all those attacks, because 3 face-up damage in standard format is enough to do pretty much everything that a deck can do in one turn. So you can kind of stop taking damage at that point, and then later on in the game you can take more and more hits if you want to keep going to 5, so that way you can go for a very big push turn towards the end of the game and try and win that way. Now, there's kind of like a big misconception in the early days of Vanguard that is kind of bleeding into Standard now, and I don't like that. And that's, back in the day, you used to just go to 5 damage and not care, because the killing power in the original Cardfight Vanguard game was non-existent. Instead of like constantly getting stronger and stronger, the game kind of actually plateaued back then. So if you had 5 damage from the get-go, you could in theory do more stuff than your opponent throughout the game than they could, which means you can kill them a lot more efficiently than they could kill you. But now it's a little bit different. Now decks can kill you at 3 damage, like, no problem. So you have to very carefully control your damage and control your what's what I'm looking for, resource management in your hand, so that way you can guard properly and not die. Basically, think of it this way. If you can do more in 2 turns with 4 damage than you can in 1 turn with 5 damage, stay at 4 damage. That's the big goal. Damage is a resource. Guard when it's early and when you should. It's tip number 1. For tip number 2, the glasses are coming on, because this is a little bit of a nerdy tip here. You should count triggers. You should know the exact number of triggers that are in your opponent's deck and what they are. I'm kidding. Vanguard is not a nerdy keep track of math game. I mean, it is, but not really. So triggers, though, they are important, but what's more important is understanding the way triggers can affect you. So the tip number 2 is count triggers, but also understand them. When your opponent has only 4 heal triggers in their deck, which we all know that they only can have, and by the way, 99.9% of decks are going to have 4 heal triggers. Only really bad players don't play with heals. Don't listen to those players. Play with heal triggers, boys and girls. Play with heal triggers. And you. And it's going to be 4. So, keeping track of those heal triggers are very important, because it allows you to understand what kind of wild stuff can happen. Because heals can really change the pace of game. healing a trigger, like I said before, damage is a resource. So being able to eliminate your kind of detriment of that resource, because if you have 6, you lose. So if you can go from 5 to 4 and still have 4 face of damage, that's so huge, because it's like you gained nothing, but it's like you lost so much pressure on yourself to keep yourself low. So heals are very important. So keep track of heals, and definitely understand that when a heal is impactful. And if you're afraid of a heal being impactful, then do tip number 3, which we'll get to in a bit. Then we'll get to in a minute. Second trigger is draw triggers. Draw triggers are very important because they can kind of just give you more resources for free. And that's really interesting to do. Also, another important reason to keep track of draw triggers is that it's also keeping track of sentinels, because almost every single person in standard is using draw trigger PGs, which if you can keep track of those, you can also keep track of how much guard potentially your opponent has for really, really strong attacks. So any Force clan should always be counting PGs and counting draw triggers specifically, because draw triggers are going to be how they stop you from killing them. So draw triggers. And then finally comes the really biggest distinction between understanding how triggers affect you and counting them, and that's crits and fronts. Now, fronts are only matter against Excel clans, but if you see 2 different arts of fronts, it's a safe assumption to think that they play 6 or more, because that's just how it works. You can only have 4 copies of a card. If you see two different arts, and that means maximum there's 8, minimum there's probably 6. You can assume that. Now, you'll get some people that are like, well, what about the people that play only 2 fronts just to mess with people? I'm like, well, those people are smart. But this video is so you can be smart, not so you can be smarter than the smart people who are trying to beat the other smart people. If that makes sense, good for you. I hope it did. I hope it did, because it made sense to me. Anywho, this video is going to be more about just the initial smart thing. If you want to go a step beyond that and counter what other people are doing, which is this, go right ahead. But this is for this initial smart thing. So, understanding the difference between fronts and crits and understanding which ones you're facing at what times are very important, because it allows you to properly guard attacks. Like I said before, Cardfight Vanguard is a game of resource management and tempo. If you can properly understand how much guard you're going to need in a turn before it happens, that is so huge you don't even know. So, for an example, if you're playing against a deck and you assume that they only have front triggers, then you know that they can't kill you on 4 damage from a Vanguard swing, which means you can no-guard a Vanguard attack. They check no triggers, you check a damage trigger, you just obliterated their whole entire turn pretty much, because they didn't get any pressure advantage on you because they couldn't threaten to kill you that turn, and you have a defensive boost in the defense trigger, or the damage trigger. I don't know why I said defense trigger. So that's a good example of how knowing that your opponent only has fronts can actually be advantageous towards your resource management during your guard steps. Very, very important. Also, it's important to realize when a front and when a crit are threatening. Crits are threatening early game, mid game, not so much late game. Unless you're just riding 4 damage the whole time, which if your opponent's a good critical player, they will have you ride the whole time. They'll control you. We'll get to that in tip number 3. But front triggers are not scary early or mid game. Sometimes mid game, depending on how threatening your opponent's being towards you. But late game, fronts are deadly. Getting a front trigger when your opponent's at 5 damage and you have like 6 attacks, you're winning that game, because that's essentially 6 more cards of shield taken away from your opponent off of 1 card, which was a variance kind of thing. So, understanding when fronts can hurt you and when fronts can't, or when crits can't, or when crits can, is really important, because it dictates how you guard and how you deal with what your opponent's doing to you. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is probably, like, this list is in no particular order, it's just like really in how I wrote these down, but this is probably the most important tip that I can give to any single person in the history of Cardfight Vanguard. Like I've said time and time again, Cardfight Vanguard is a resource tempo game. It's a little bit different than Magic and Pokemon, where your cards are, where there's specific cards that are designated to be resources, like energy or trainer cards or mana. Those cards are specifically resources and nothing else. In Vanguard, your units and your resources are one and the same. They're your guards, they're your attackers, and they're your kind of killers, because they're also the cards that affect you with damage. So understanding that every single card in a Vanguard deck is a resource means that every single deck, in theory, can be a control-y type deck, because you can deny your opponent resources at every single point in the game by doing one simple thing. You don't even need to have a retire effect. You can just attack Rearguards. If your opponent wombos you on turn 3 and counterblasts like 3 damage, calls a whole board, and swings at you a lot, you do not have to retaliate with your own wombo unless you're really threatened of being killed the next turn. If you're confident that you won't die, attack their rearguards, deny them the ability of counterblast and resources because they spent resources to call those cards and they're just sitting there. If you get rid of them, they're gone. Also, if they spend cards to protect those resources, the rearguards, then they're losing more and more resources, you guys, and then that will put you in the advantage, even though you have, in theory, more damage than your opponent. Damage is a resource, but it's also a killer, but it also doesn't matter that much, if you really think about it. If you're confident that you're not going to die, your damage may as well be 0. So, the more that you can take advantage away from your opponent, the more and more that you're not going to die. It's really pertinent to you guys that you understand this, because if you want to get better at Cardfight Vanguard, or if you are already a competitive player and you want to get even better, you have to understand the way that the game functions and the way that the game works in order for you to succeed. So attacking rearguards to get an advantageous resource advantage over your opponent is by far the best tip I could give any single person in the world. Now, what does that mean? That means using your Vanguard to attack rearguards. I know, insane, right? Use your Vanguard and attack a rearguard on turn 2 of the game, and I promise you, you're going to win that game 9 times out of 10 because your opponent will just go, what? I thought I was going to get a damage that turn. It shocks your opponent's mind, and they don't know what to do about it because they thought they were going to get a resource, a damage. That turn they didn't. And instead they lost the rearguard that they kind of just expunged for no reason to try and pressure you. That's why I personally hate rush deck strategies, but they do work. So, there's that. My best advice kind of to you guys when it comes to kind of mastering this tip is find a friend who plays Gold Paladin, play against them, and then attack every single rearguard that they play, and watch how you slowly win that game. I promise you, it's kind of insane. Deny them counterblast, deny them resources, you'll win any game ever, I promise. Now, obviously, if you have a big crit on a rearguard, swinging at a Vanguard, if they're at 4 damage, because then you'll win the game. But, that's just proper attacking sequences. That doesn't really... you should already know that if you want to get competitive at the game. These are kind of secrets that people don't already know about. And more people don't know about attacking rearguards, especially in standard format when rearguards are so powerful. But anywho, doesn't matter. Tip number 4. This one kind of is a big picture type tip, but I wanted to include it as kind of a very, very specific thing because it shocks me so much that people don't understand this. Listen to the anime, you guys. The anime is right. Have a winning image. Your winning image is the way that your deck functions and the way that your deck tries to win a game. Understand those qualities. Understand those factors of your deck and how it fits in the meta that you are seeing at your local game shop or at your local tournaments or even at regional level events. Look into stuff. Know how the game works and know what's popular in the game so that way you can know how to respond to it. And so my best advice when trying to work on this tip is to look at your deck, read every single card, know what every single card does. It bothers me so much when people read their own cards. I'm like, you don't know what your own cards do? That's not okay, cool, I won this game. Reading your opponent's cards is fine. I'm not saying memorize every single skill in the history of Cardfight Vanguard. Your brain will die. What I am saying is, though, understand what works for your deck, what your deck can do, and what hurts your deck. If you understand those 3 things, and you understand how to win the game with your deck, you'll win a lot more than you'll lose. Trust me. This really goes into surprisability or unpreparedness from your opponent. If your opponent shocks you with something and you can't perfectly respond to it, your opponent is now in the driver's seat of the tempo of that game. And what have I been saying this whole entire video? Vanguard is a game of tempo. If you let your opponent control the tempo and the pace of how the game's going to go, and you let their winning image be the driver of this kind of race or this kind of car ride that you're on in this game, then you're gonna be the one losing because they'll get there first, or they'll decide when it's their time. You need to shock that. You need to change that. You need to figure out what you can do to get rid of their winning image and put yours in there too. Now, this is probably the most complicated tip that I have because it really does matter on what your opponent's doing to you. If your opponent is sitting there doing nothing, then well, your winning image is driving all day long and you're chilling. But that doesn't always happen. Your opponent can counter you, like I've said before, by attacking your rearguards, denying you resources, and you need to know how to respond to something like this. Not every deck can do it so well. Like I said before, Gold Paladins really doesn't have anything to respond to getting rid of rearguards and denying counterblasts. That's kind of like their biggest weakness in Standard right now. Figure out what cards you can put into your deck to help, facilitate your weaknesses and deal facilitate your advantages and deal with your weaknesses. That's like a really, really important thing that I think any deck builder or any kind of Cardfight Vanguard player that is worth their salt can tell you is a good idea to do. Playing cards that you maybe wouldn't think otherwise would be good, or playing or using a specific strategy, a specific matchup that you might think might not actually work, but turns out to be the biggest way that you win. A good example of this is that whenever I play Kagero in a Kagero mirror match, I always ride Waterfall first if I have the option to, because I want to make my opponent feel like they're ahead of me and feel safe to go for a Dragonic Overlord swing, and then I make them lose cards from hand. I push them to 3 damage. I ride another Waterfall. I put Gaia in the Soul, and then I swing at them for 3 crit, and they lose because they kind of discarded a lot of cards in their hand to get some advantageous position. Now, that's a riskier play, too, because that allows a lot of variance for your opponent, but it's just a good example of what I'm talking about for a good play that you can make as a player to kind of shock the winning image of both of you to get ahead of them, for sure. And on to tip number 5. I've already done kind of like a big picture, very, very niche example, and this last one is more of a quality of life tip. Because if you want to get more competitive at Cardfight Vanguard, you kind of are going to want to like Cardfight Vanguard a lot. So this tip is to help people love Cardfight Vanguard some more. Now, Cardfight Vanguard is a game of variance. There's literally a mechanic that puts luck into almost every decision you want to make as a player. If I knew I was going to get a trigger that turn, I would have played differently. If I didn't know I was going to get a trigger that turn, I would have played differently. You know, that's my example. And this variance can really dictate how a game goes in ways that aren't really so fun for people. You know, if I check 2 triggers and my opponent checks 11, and we both did whatever we wanted to do, well, obviously they won because they got luckier than I did. And that can feel really bad, and that really, really hurts. But, and I'll be the first to tell you, I don't handle stuff like that very well myself in my real life playing. I go, oh man, poor shucks. But I don't let it get to me because I want to make sure that I project nothing but love and joy for this game into my community, because that's what will allow the community to grow and in turn allow my enjoyment of the game, on average, to actually get better. So I'm going to go over 4 things with you guys for this tip. Number 1, how to identify a good game. Number 2, how to kind of celebrate a good game. Number 3, how to identify a bad game. And number 4, why that's not so bad. Okay, number 1. How to identify a good game is really easy. You and your opponent both do what you want to do, and one of you wins. Luck really doesn't play a role that much in a game like that, believe it or not. If you do what you want to do perfectly, and your opponent does what they want to do perfectly, and a little variance here and there helps you facilitate those things, really one person should win, and you should both be okay with it, and you might be able to walk away and say, wow, that was a really, really close game. Good job, my guy. Good job to you too. Boom. There you go. That's a good game. Variance does play a role because it's a mechanic of the game, but it also doesn't really matter because you both did what you wanted to do. That is the main thing here. So, moving on to number 2, how to kind of celebrate a good game is don't really, like, if it was solely a decision that you made that decided the game, celebrate that to yourself, but don't really, like, rub it into anybody or brag about it, because anyone can win a game of Cardfight Vanguard, you know. It takes a really impressive person to do it a lot and to do it with class. So winning with class is very, very important because it celebrates the game in a healthy way that can allow more and more people to feel like they can win, because anyone can. So just be careful not to brag too much when like a really like monumentally good game happens, that you don't just make it all about you. Your opponent had a good game and so did you. Celebrate that whole game together. And try and make it a little bit easier on your opponent because they did lose, or you did lose. Would you like it if someone was like bragging to you about, man, that was so close, you almost had me? You know, you should really be like, man, that game was crazy. I'm glad we got to experience that game together, my man. And that's like, make it a thing that you did like to share instead of a thing that you got and they didn't get. That's a good thing. Alright, now let's get to the like real salt part, number 3. How to identify a bad game. Now, I might get some flack for this because if you're anywhere near the Vanguard community, it is like well known that we hate best of one. We just hate the fact that there's so much variance in this game that we cannot control that can really decide a lot of games. But I want to push that to the side. Triggers don't really matter. You know, the amount of triggers someone gets isn't really what makes a bad game happen. And that's not, and that's what I'm getting about. A bad game is where you only lose because you didn't get to do what you wanted, and your opponent just got to play solitaire for 10 minutes. Those are bad games. You draw 5 zeros in your hand, and you say pass for 10 turns, and you lose. Or, like, not even 10, like 4. Like, maybe even 2. And your opponent wins the game. That's a bad game. And that's the only kind of bad game that's really acceptable to even remotely complain about. And even then you shouldn't, because there's literally nothing you could have done. And that's why it's a bad game. You have no way to control that. Even with triggers involved, you know triggers are involved in the game. Play around it. If you're a little bit ahead of the game, use some of that extra resources you gain to eliminate some of that risk of possibly losing the game. If you're afraid of your opponent healing on their turn from 4 damage to 3 damage, so that way you can't kill them, take that 5th damage during their turn if they attack with a rearguard first, and bada bing bada boom, they can't heal out of it. You go on your turn, you win on their 4 damage turn, and you move on with your life. You did that by using your damage as a resource, guarding properly when you should, understanding what your opponent could do to you, and finding out your winning image. Look at that. It just all came full circle right there. Isn't that crazy? And by doing so, you can figure out what an actual bad game is. Because in that game, sure, your opponent could have gotten lucky and beaten you, but guess what? Even if they would have, you controlled for that and you won anyway. I had someone very recently heal twice on 6 damage on me in 2 different turns, and I still won the game. Because I was so far ahead by all the other many things that I did throughout the game that amount of luck didn't matter. You can eliminate the risk of luck. That's something that you can control. What you can't control is you getting a hand where you can't literally do anything and your opponent plays solitaire. But guess what, you guys? That's not Cardfight Vanguard's fault. That's in any game you play. Play Magic, you get mana screwed. Play Pokemon, you draw no Pokemon, you get benched. Play, I don't know, Transformers, draw whatever you need to draw to do in that game. I don't know how to play Transformers, but you get the idea. That's in every single card game. Okay? So don't let a really bad game actually dictate how you feel about the game itself. Because deep down, it wasn't your fault, and it really wasn't the game's fault. It was the world's fault. And at that point, if you're getting mad at the world for being not nice to you, don't go outside. Because it's scary out there, you guys. So, I don't want to be super negative here. Moving on to point number 4. How to handle a bad game. A truly bad game, which I've already described before, is a game where you truly just couldn't play it, and you got to watch your opponent play solitaire for 10 minutes. That sucks. I am sorry for you if that ever happens to you. It happens to me all the time. And I'm very bad at this too. I'm very bad at not taking that negative energy that I have towards the obvious bad thing that happened and projecting it onto something else. You'll project it onto your opponent, be like, oh man, that guy sucked. I totally would have beat him anyway. How do you know? You didn't get to do anything. Oh man, the game sucks. It never lets me do anything ever. How do you know? It just happened that one time. The last game you won in 10 minutes too, but you got to do all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's all subjective. Don't let it be that one moment that decides your feelings for the next 2 hours, okay? Or the next 2 days even. People hold stuff for a long time. And I'm very bad at this. When a truly bad game happens to me, I get really, really salty and really, really uncomfortable because if I'm being honest with you guys, I'm very confident in my ability in this game, and I've always said 100 times, if I'm able to do everything I want in any game ever, I'm gonna win that game. I am, because I'm doing everything that I want, and I'm very competitive-minded. I know how to win any kind of matchup, so in any matchup, I'd be doing what I wanted, so I'd be winning the game. You know what I'm saying? But when I can't do that, literally it's like I'm not even playing the game anymore. I'm just watching someone play the game, and that's not fun for me, and I don't enjoy that. But I don't take that energy, I don't put it on anybody else. I don't give it to the game. I don't give it to the world. I keep it in here, and I say, you know what? I'm gonna take this negative energy, and I'm gonna make sure that I get rid of it in a healthy way, so that way I don't ruin the community that I love. And I promise you guys, I promise, the second you realize when you should actually be upset, and you're not upset at anybody or anything, you'll deal with it really, really well. Now, obviously, be salty. That's fine. Be salty when it's rightful. Go complain with your buddies to the side. That's totally fine. I get that. That's how you vent. That's how you vent, you know? But don't ruin the community with it. Don't bother the community. Don't blame Bushiroad. Don't blame Cardfight Vanguard, because there's nothing anyone could have done about it. Not even you. So don't let that stuff ruin the enjoyment of the game for everybody else. Because I promise you, if everyone's enjoying the game, you're going to enjoy it a little bit more too. And that will add to the quality of life of your game, and that will make you want to play it more and more and more, and that will make you more and more competitive. And that's tip number 5 for how to get better at the Cardfight Vanguard TCG. Alright everybody, those are my top 5 tips and tricks on how to get more competitive with the Cardfight Vanguard TCG. We had some technical stuff, some emotional stuff, and some all around just big picture stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, let me know by go ahead and hitting that like button and subscribing if you're new, so that way you know when my videos go live for you. And let me know if you watched the video this far, comment, Steven, you're awesome, and I learned this, and whatever you learned in the comment section down below, and I'd be happy to go a big like or a big old reply to that comment. If you have any questions, please be sure to go ahead, type in that comment section. And if you're interested on following me on any other social platforms, I have Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch all down in the description below, as well as my own personal Discord server for my personal community of my Twitch subscribers, viewers, and YouTube subscribers. If you want to go join that Discord, it's a big old awesome family of the True Squad, and I want it to grow and grow and grow, and I'm super excited with how it's going, and I'm really excited to announce some new videos that are coming out later. I'll be doing a similar video to this for the Pokemon TCG in the coming future, as well as a Learn How to Play Cardfight Vanguard premium tutorial, because, well, there's a lot more mechanics in that game than in Standard that I want to really delve into and talk about, such as striding, G-guarding, Legion, and a whole mess of other stuff that I think a lot of people don't know about, and it kind of is scary to think about. So I really want to make a video to help you all learn about that premium format as well. And with all that being said, you guys, I've been Truechampionsteven. This has been my Vanguard video of the week, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your days. Always remember to work hard, rest easy, and live well, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.